entered first and stepped over to the bank. Joe Rooney was still making his deposit. Law waited quietly until Rooney had completed his transaction. As a kid was about to enter, Mrs. Wildhat came along to do some shopping. The kid told her she could not enter the bank. At the same time, Jim Shirley slipped in unnoticed through the rear side door. When Joe Rooney stepped away from the cashier's cage, George Law kept his eyes on him while he stepped up to the grating of the cage and ordered David Smith to throw up his hands. He fired a shot close to Smith's head to show him what kind of business he meant.
Hey, what's going on? Everybody get your hands in the air.
Customers and clerks raised their heads and looked around to see what was going on. Ed Hall picked up a scale weight from the counter and was going to throw it at the outlaw, but the kid pointed his gun at him and told him he had better drop it. He did. Jim Shirley and the kid acted quickly, disarmed the customers and clerks, and herded them into the center of the room, forcing their hands up high. Smith was slow in obeying the order from Law, and the robber fired another bullet past Smith's head. It struck the store ledger and blew it all to hell, one observer said later. Law then moved around to the cashier's door and rattled it, trying to get it to open. It wouldn't budge, and he turned to Mr. Rooney and forced him to walk down to the center aisle of the store and join the other customers, covered by Shirley and the kid. Tom Sarevin from inside the Meeker Hotel heard the shots along with C.J. Duffy and Phil Barnhart, who had a reputation for heavy drinking. Word quickly spread up and down Main Street of Meeker that a bank robbery was in progress. Within seconds, people of the town were armed and hiding behind buildings, lurking in windows and doors, waiting tensely for the robbers to appear. Phil Barnhart, determined to aid in the defense of Meeker, picked up a rock. Mrs. Tom Warren came down the street to the store, and Barnhart said, "Don't go in there, lady, there's a holdup."
Don't go in there, lady. Hold up.
"I guess I know my business," she snorted. "Go on in, lady," Barnhart replied, "and get your butt shot off." Mrs. Warren found other business to attend to. H.S. Simp Harp, founder of Harp Transportation, and F.N. Johangdon crept inside a corral for freight horses located behind the Hugus building. They waited patiently for the outlaws to emerge. Inside the Hugus store, Jim Shirley was walking up to A.C. Moulton. "Here, Mr. Cashier, we want you," he said to the manager. Sorry, I lost my place. Moulton looked down Shirley's gun barrel, a barrel so large he later said it looked big enough to sleep in. Shirley led Moulton to the bank office door and ordered it open. Moulton complied.
Everybody keep your hands up. Keep them up.
"Where's your money?" Shirley snapped.
Where's your money, Barman?
Moulton nodded to the cash drawer and replied, "Help yourself."
Help yourself.
Law produced an old sugar sack and began filling it. At the sound of the first shots, students at the school, which was located on 6th and Hill, wanted to run downtown to see what was going on. Mr. W.H. Clark, their school teacher and the first mayor of Meeker, would not permit it. However, he quickly ran downtown. Clark, also a surveyor, had his surveyor's notebook in the right breast pocket of his shirt, a habit that on that day was going to prove life-saving. He came into the area in back of the store and met Ben Nichols with a new 30-40. Nichols shoved him the rifle and ran back home, where he retrieved a .45-70 Remington rifle. As Law finished emptying the cash drawer, Shirley gathered up the ammunition and guns in the store. He broke the stocks of all the rifles, saving 3 new ones. He loaded each one of them for the trio. They grabbed the rifles. Jim Shirley began to push Joe Rooney ahead of him as a shield. Then the other robbers followed, with Moulton, Smith, Booth, Herrick, Dykeman, Hall, and a couple of customers who were in the store as their hostages. They moved toward the rear side of the store, walked through it, and onto the boardwalk. Clark waited outside by the Hugus & Company granary. As soon as Shirley reached the street, he spotted Clark. He raised his rifle and shot Clark in the right breast, hitting him 2 inches to the right of his nipple. The bullet was partially deflected by the surveyor's notebook, saving Clark's life. Mr. Keith Clark, grandson of W.H. Clark, said they kept the notebook until it was destroyed by a fire in 1948. After Clark was shot, the robbers marched the hostages down another 25 or 30 feet where their horses were tied. Here, Law and Shirley began to untie the horses while the kid held his rifle on the captives. Having held their arms in the air for a considerable time and getting tired, one of them broke and ran. Immediately, the others followed suit. The kid opened fire, hitting Victor Dykeman in the arm. Dykeman later discovered a bullet hole in the crown of his hat, and a streak of hair was missing from the top of his head. Booth's left ear was nicked by a bullet, and Herrick had a finger cut by a bullet. When the hostages broke and ran, it left the robbers exposed to the guns of the men of Meeker. Simp Harp and Joe Hangden leveled their guns on the kid and Jim Shirley. The outlaws were hit almost immediately. Shirley was shot through the left lung, and the kid through the heart, killing him instantly. Shirley was game to the last, fired his revolver until it was empty while laying on the ground before he died. George Law, on seeing his partners fall, broke and ran toward Ben Nichols' deadly aim settled on Law. He was hit right in the right lung and left leg before he reached the corner near the Miller house. Law was taken to a cabin nearby. When questioned, he said the leader was Charles Jones. The kid was Billy Smith, and his name was George Harris. At this time, it was believed that these names were fictitious, and so they proved to be. Law asked to have his boots removed. "I don't want to die with my boots on." Just before Law died, his last words were, "Oh, Mother." The robbers were laid out in the Hugus granary at the rear of the store. A number of townfolk went to the granary to view the would-be robbers. When Mrs. Ed Fairfield saw them, she promptly fainted. No one seemed to know what to do, and one old fellow said, "Loosen her corset, she can breathe better."
We gotta loosen the corset, she'll breathe better.
Maggie Cassidy, one of the students, told to stay put by Clark, along with a few others, went down into the granary where they looked at the bodies. She was there until her father came in. They're on their way. She was there until her father came in and said, "Maggie, I think you had better go home." Maggie went home. When school was out, the 3 Baker girls rushed down to the Aldrich house where they kept their horse and cart. When they headed for home, they passed the hitching rail at the Hugus store, and other school children called to them to come see the dead guys. They started home, and while they passed the store, Mr. Clark was being loaded into Kitty's wagon. John Watson picked up Victor Dykeman and carried him into the Meeker Hotel. Clark was taken to his home by the old Army garrison, which is now the museum. Mr. French attended both Clark and Dykeman, and they recovered quickly. Undertaker Niblock buried the 3 robbers in the southeast corner of the cemetery on Wednesday, the following day. The coroner's jury verdict was brief. The deceased came to their death by gunshot wounds inflicted by the citizens in defense of life and property, and that the killing was justifiable. Shortly after the robbery, 2 horses, a sorrel and a pack saddle, sorrel with a pack saddle, rifle scabbard, and 2 horseshoes tied to it, and a gray horse were found by Marshal Williams in Powell Park. They were determined to have been the property of the outlaws. 17 days later, Sam Weir came across the camp and the relay horses at the head of 3 Mile Gulch. 1 horse was dead, the other 2 could barely stand. Weir was able to nurse one of the horses back to health and used him for years after the robbery. And what happened to the money? Perhaps the greatest irony of the affair was when the sack of money was found in the bank office after George Law put the money in the sack, about $1,600, and then left it inside the bank. We hope you enjoyed our presentation. Thank you.